Hello and welcome once more to RMTV, the online station that brings you news about the transport industry. Today we're going to be talking about maritime issues with RMT's National Secretary, Steve Todd. Steve, can we talk about discrimination on UK vessels? Our union's been conducting a very lengthy campaign to do away with discrimination. There have been some developments, I know. The Carter report has actually recommended that the union's position should be accepted fully by the government. Can you bring us up to speed?
The Carter report obviously is a result of the campaigning that the RMT's been involved in for over 30 years now to try and get the full repeal of Section 9 of the Race Relations Act.
Of course, the infamous Section 9, which is the part of the Act that exempts ship owners from having to observe the Race Relations Act.
That Act clearly allows them to discriminate and bring in workers and replace British seafarers with workers from another country and pay them lesser wages than their counterparts. And nowhere else in UK industry is that allowed to happen. We saw an attempt for it to happen in the power stations a couple of years ago, and you've seen the mass demonstrations outside power stations and all that, a couple of years ago where it was attempted there, but they never got away with it there. But they've been allowed to do it in the shipping industry for some time. And again, I believe it's as a result of their influence over government. They were the people with the money and they were the people pulling the purse strings, I think. You look at what the UK shipping industry brings into the balance of payments today, I think they still have a mighty powerful pull and persuasion with government, whoever they are. The national agreements which are there, which are put into place and we work hard to maintain, that Race Relations Act, Section 9 of that Act, allows the total undermining of those agreements. So in effect, your agreement can become obsolete overnight, really, by that one act. But it wasn't just about protecting the jobs, as we said before. It was about the social conscience of not having seafarers discriminated against because they come from another country, And to say you can pay one seafarer one rate of pay, work alongside a guy from the Philippines or India or anywhere else in the world and pay him a different rate of pay for the same job is criminal.
So what it's resulted in has been very wealthy shipping companies legally being entitled, actually having a charter, to make huge amounts of money out of paying seafarers rates of pay that a British seafarer simply couldn't look at.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's done, Derek, and they've been allowed to do that just willingly, without any challenge at all over the years, except for, say, the RMT, putting their case forward and putting the case forward at every opportunity. And don't forget this latest review of the Race Relations Act and the Carter report, which has followed since the independent report which the government commissioned. They've only been pressurised into doing those as a result of the RMT making a complaint to Europe over the way the UK operates the Race Relations Act and the way the UK discriminates or allows discrimination on ships. So had we not done that, and had we not instigated that complaint to the Commission, the European Commission, I don't think we'd have been at the stage where we are today.
If we can turn now to the Royal Fleet Auxiliary, Steve, there's a so-called value for money review underway. I wonder if you can tell us what's been happening recently on that score.
The value for money review is still underway, and as we believe, it wouldn't be a short journey, although we were given some expectations just prior to the general election by the previous government, the previous administration, that they were not going to kick this into the long grass. They knew the anxiety and the worries of the RFA workers in not knowing what the future held for them, and they were going to bring it to a conclusion sooner rather than later. Not surprisingly, they never did, and the review is still underway. And obviously, if you look at what the budget said this week with the cuts in the public sector, goodness knows where that's going to leave us with RFA at the moment. And yeah, we probably fear the worst, but we're ready for the worst, and we've got to keep pushing to see what the value for money review comes out with what we expect. The review, if you remember rightly, come on the back of a previous review which took a number of years, spent millions of pounds of taxpayers' money, and said at the end of it that the RFA was good value for money, as it was, supplying the Navy as they were with British ratings and officers on board. And 2 years after that review, and they said, and incidentally, they did say at the time there would not be another review till 2020. 2 years into that last review, they come along with this other value for money review. And if you look at what's going on now with the public sector, all the proposed cuts by the condems and everything else what they're proposing, you would expect that RFA will come under close scrutiny as will the rest of the armed forces.
So how do we approach it from the union's point of view from now, Steve?
Well, what the union needs to be doing now is to scrutinise this very, very carefully and keep our finger completely on the pulse and press for meetings with the shipping minister and everybody else involved in this value for money review, Treasury, shipping minister, everybody else, as we did with the previous government. And incidentally, on the way out of the door from seeing the shipping minister the other day, the partner shot was, "We still need to see you with regard to the value for money review involving RFA." His words to me were, "I'm well aware of that, and I know your concerns, and you're most welcome to ask for another meeting at the earliest opportunity." So what we will do again is press for another meeting with him and with the Treasury people to see where we stand with this.
Steve, we can turn now to Portsmouth and P&O. I understand the union's been successful in avoiding redundancies on the Pride of Bilbao.
The company announced earlier this year that P&O were pulling out of the Portsmouth Bilbao run, and the ship, the Pride of Bilbao, would cease to operate from September this year. That would possibly result in a number of redundancies for our members down there. I'm happy to say that is not the case. Again, along with our policy on no compulsory redundancies, there will be no redundancies as a result of this. The company are in the process of identifying areas within the P&O fleet in the UK where our seafarers from Portsmouth can be employed elsewhere. That is reassuring for our seafarers, and discussions are still ongoing with regard to where they all go. I've got to say that discussions have sort of spluttered and false started over the last couple of weeks because the company are not in a position yet to conclude what everybody's options are and where the options are for people to go should they require to relocate. So we're pushing the company to get that meeting back on track so that the members down there in Portsmouth, the P&O employees down there in Portsmouth, know exactly where they stand and where their future lies with regard to their future employment. It's no good for those people sitting there with the sword of Damocles hanging over their heads and not knowing where their next job is. I've got to say that whilst the P&O employees who are members of RMT, their future looks pretty secure, it's not the same for the agency people who are employed by Clyde Marine. The agency people down there are just about being paid the minimum wage, and we suspect that in some circumstances are being paid less than the minimum wage by the virtue of the fact that the company are allowed to charge seafarers for their accommodation, uniforms and medicals. Now, as a result of the RMT's discussions with the company, all the money for medical certificates has been reimbursed, I believe, and the deposits which they took, as they said it was deposits for the uniforms, are being reimbursed as we speak as well. I've got to say there are not many places in this industry where you see people paying for the uniforms or you see people being charged for medical certificates once they're employed. It's a seafarer's responsibility to get his medical certificates updated and renewed. And unfortunately, when he's out of work, he's got to do that himself out of his own pocket. But whilst he's employed for a company, he should never have to do that. The same with the uniforms. But the biggest shock of the lot came when we found out that seafarers there were being charged for their accommodation. I've been in this industry for 38 years, or involved in the industry for 38 years now almost. And I've never known any seafarer to be charged for their accommodation. So that's appalling in our view, and we're taking legal advice and exploring legal avenues to see if we can recoup that money for those seafarers. And if we find, in fact, that it is illegal what the company have been doing, we will take the necessary steps legally to recover that money on behalf of our members.
Steve, Todd, thank you very much indeed.
Cheers, Derek.